Test, test.
How about you? I want to try different.
You want me to try mine? Can you hear mine?
Oh no, they're how long of cord do you have?
Test, test, test.
Working?
there a Kailisha Peak? We need a complete address. Harding. Johnson. Melton. Palermo. Rowe. Bagley. Mr. President.
Here.
An affidavit of publication is on file for this meeting and public hearing, and a current copy of the Open Meeting Act is posted in a white binder on the east wall of the legislative chambers.
Good evening and welcome to the Omaha City Council and the 2002 City of Omaha Budget Public Hearing. We're pleased to see you all here. We look forward to hearing what you have to say and your input on the city's budget for 2022. The public hearing is conducted in accordance with the requirements of city charter and state law. To make tonight's proceedings as efficient as possible, we'll follow procedures we've generally followed in the past, and I'll ask the city clerk, Eliza Butler, to describe the procedures for tonight's public hearing.
All right.
Would you like to? Okay.
To the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right.
Thank you, Madam Clerk.
Yes. This public hearing is for the 2022 city budget. Before you entered the chamber, you were asked to sign in. The council president will call you to the podium in that order. We ask that you keep your comments limited to the budget and that you speak for no more than 3 minutes. The light at the podium will turn yellow when you have 30 seconds remaining in your time. Please summarize your comments at that point. When the light turns red, your time has expired. If you have written out your presentation, please consider stating your name and address and submitting the presentation for council members to review later. Your written comments will then be part of the official record. Council members and other city officials are here to listen to your comments. They will not respond or debate the issues tonight. Council members welcome your calls and emails if you wish to discuss issues in greater detail. I will also note the Finance Director's budget presentation is attached to the online agenda and a copy is available at this desk.
Thank you. I would also note that after this public hearing, the budget review process continues. The City Council members will consider your input as we continue to review the recommended budget. We're scheduled to vote on the budget on our regular council meeting Tuesday, August 17th at 2 p.m. I'd ask everyone to remain considerate of your fellow citizens with your comments on the budget and stay within your allotted time and be respectful of views that may differ from your own. In addition, I ask that you turn off and silence all your cell phones at this time. We do have testimony today for a number of folks, most by a large amount that are here in the chambers, but we have provided 2 different avenues this year that we haven't done before. The second is those that are in the chambers but have done the necessary process not to provide their address. So we'll deal with and call up those that are here in the chambers who have not gone through that process and your address is required when you come to the podium. Then we'll go to those that are here in the audience but do not have to give their address because they went through that process. And then thirdly, we have some folks by Zoom today. I think actually only one that has pre-registered for that alternative. This is a budget public hearing on the 2022 budget, so I ask you to keep your remarks to that. But I would also note that I think we'll hear a lot about some issues we all care about tonight that pertain to things like affordable housing and mental health and violence prevention. And I want all of you to know as well that there is a separate process concerning the federal ARPA funds, the American Rescue Plan Act funds that come to the city, $112 million. They'll have a separate process, and if you wish to weigh in on that, and I recommend that you do, the method to do that right now is on the mayor's website at www.cityofomaha.org by August 15th. Thank you. With that, we'll now commence with the first speaker, and that first speaker registered is Doug Kagan. Please come down.
Good evening. Doug Kagan, 416 South 130th Street, representing Nebraska Taxpayers for Freedom. We regard this budget as taxpayer-friendly, strong, and stable for many reasons. The almost 500-page budget is easy to read and to analyze. The budget bases on accrual accounting, whereby revenues collected and expenditures appear in the same fiscal year accounting period in which collected and spent. This system prevents taxing authorities from perpetuating projects into future fiscal years in order to pump up the revenue projections. The Stothard administration has given Omahans a slight property tax decrease and spent frugally. Although the recent street bond issue allows the city to raise our property taxes, the administration chose not to do so for the next two fiscal years. The administration aggressively has collected all revenues due the city and aggressively sought grants. Investments are done with least default risk and at a very favorable rate of return. Expenses were cut in several funds, for example, the Downtown Stadium Fund. Although the general fund budget increased by 3.48%, we must consider the unexpected pandemic costs. General bond obligation debt scheduled to drop the next several years. The debt service is lower. With a rising crime rate, much more funding for police patrol activities and mental health responders. However, as usual, we do have suggestions for budget cuts. Insurance and pension costs continue to rise, so expect employees to pay a higher percentage of their premiums. Eliminate longevity and specialty pay and step increases. End annual and sick leave balance payoff. Eliminate funding for non-basic private community programs that can rely on private contributions. End city-sponsored sports leagues. Defund the Deputy Chief of Staff for Diversity and Equity in the Mayor's Office. Institute interlocal agreements for purchase services, supplies, and equipment where expenses are constantly rising. Thank you.
Thank you. Next testifier is Chris Koff, Sienna Francis House.
Thank you to the esteemed council members for the opportunity to speak in support of the mayor's 2022 proposed budget. My name is Chris Knopf. I'm the Chief Development Officer at Sienna Francis House at 1702 Nicholas Street. And again, we're speaking in support of the proposed budget, specifically the community service programs allocation. These allocations are vital to many important services and programs throughout our community. Specific to the Sienna Francis House, continued funding helps provide critical services, including emergency shelter, residential substance abuse treatment, and permanent supportive housing. Despite the pandemic, all of these services continued without interruption 24/7 in 2020, meaning that in the previous year alone, in this community, 2,634 individuals experiencing homelessness received emergency shelter services. Case management services, specifically designed to link individuals to needed community services as part of their path towards permanent housing, were provided to 94% of those who were admitted to our shelter. During this past year, we assisted 431 individuals in securing positive housing destinations following their stay at the shelter. Extending our scope of services to the operation on campus was extending our scope of services to the operations were on-campus COVID isolation and quarantine units, ensuring the safety of the homeless community and the city at large. Also in 2020, this allocation helped us grow and develop our street outreach program, a partnership with the Parks Department, Omaha Police, and other homeless providers to address an increase of street homelessness, or also known as unsheltered homeless individuals. This program allows us to perform street outreach to individuals and attempt to connect them with shelter and other services to meet their immediate needs. Our outreach providers are able to assist when homeless encampments are identified by concerned citizens and businesses and resolve issues collaboratively with the city departments as noted above. Addressing a complex problem like homelessness requires many programs and many partners, and the City Council and Mayor have done a great job funding programming like case management, homeless outreach, mental health responders, and job development. This is improving our coordinated system and having direct outcomes to those in need of services. Thank you for supporting the allocation to the Sienna Francis House and our community partners to continue this important work.
Thank you. Next testifier is Ashley Willie.
My name is Ashley Willie, and I'm the Development Coordinator for the Set Me Free project. On behalf of the rest of the team and our CEO, Stephanie Olson, who cannot be here, I would like to thank you for your continued support of our mission to provide prevention education to youth and families to end human trafficking. We educate with our specially designed curriculum for youth 3rd grade through college, addressing vital issues like healthy relationships, identifying a trustworthy person, social media safety. Then beginning in middle school, we start educating on human trafficking. Not only have we helped youth understand their intrinsic value, but we also activate their critical thinking skills in an interactive way that's both bold and fun. We also educate communities because prevention must be a community response. And the community of Omaha is a hotspot for trafficking. We need everyone to understand that trafficking does not happen the way that most people think it does. It rarely happens through kidnapping. Most often in the Midwest, here in Omaha, it happens through relationship building and individuals thinking they can trust someone that they cannot. We also know that less than 2% of individuals that are trafficked are ever recovered. If we can prevent our youth, your kids, your grandkids from being trafficked to begin with, then we as a community will save on financial, we'll save on medical, rescue, and therapeutic needs. As an example, the Department of Human Services in Minnesota found that the prevention of sex trafficking in adolescents is in the best interest of taxpayers. Prevention results in a return on investment of approximately $34 for every $1 spent. Now, the Set Me Free project and those that support us know that the same is true for Omaha taxpayers. As well as saving taxpayer money, we have been able to use your financial support to not only train schools and youth, but we have also been honored to train teams of the OFD and the OPD crisis advocates. We have also begun work with the Douglas County Sheriff Office to ensure that youth can be safe from traffickers in our community. Throughout the school year, the number of disclosures and requests for help have more than doubled from students suffering from human trafficking, physical abuse, cyber stalking, and so many other problems. When you fund the Set Me Free project, your dollars go directly to prevent youth from suffering trauma and pain in Omaha and to stop human trafficking. Thank you for your time and your consideration, as well as your decision to be a part of the solution.
Thank you, Ashley. And I do have your address here, but could you say it just for the record, please?
It's 7526 South 191st Street, Omaha, Nebraska 68136.
Thank you. Next speaker is Lynn Mills. After Lynn, we'll have Nicholas Bonnett Murphy, just to give you a heads up.
Good evening. My name is Lynn Mills. My address is 3509 California Street. I'm here today to oppose the proposed city budget for next year. As a resident of Omaha, I ask each of you, in particular, Danny Bagel, District 3, I am in your district, sir, Mr. Bagley, that the budget plan, I'm sorry, I lost my place. I want to make the following amendment. Divert funds from Omaha Police Department, reallocate in creating a non-aggressive crisis response team. For example, in Eugene, Oregon, a program called CAHOOTS, CAHOOTS, is a crisis assistance street program started in 1989. The team goes to calls that cover mental health, addiction, and homelessness. The unarmed responders are trained in crisis intervention and de-escalation. They have 2 people trained, a mental health crisis counselor and a medic that respond to non-emergency 911 calls. I'm not suggesting that this is the perfect solution, but there are alternatives to funding the police department. I believe that invest and restore community trust, reinvest and restore community trust is needed in this city in Omaha right now. The Omaha Police Department harms our communities. This is why I invite you to imagine a world where we invest in people and actual crime prevention, like mental health resources, education, job development, and affordable housing. Imagine a world where Zachary Bareheels got the help he needed during his mental health crisis, where his mother is not mourning the loss of her son, who was killed by Omaha police. A world where Kenneth Jones and Nigel Phillips were not murdered by the Omaha police during traffic stops, leaving behind grieving children and family members. A world where peaceful protesters are not violently arrested and targeted by police surveillance. Omaha families have lost loved ones. We are a community here. The unnecessary aggressive force by the Omaha Police Department
Thank you, Lynn.
tears
That's the
family
red light
apart.
there, if you can summarize.
Yes. Please reject the proposed budget and invest in our communities. Look into demilitarizing force in the police and solutions that we need to live life in the fullest, and invest in solutions that actually facilitate public safety, like HOOTS or other affordable health care, education, and workforce development. Thank you for your extra time.
Thank you. Next, we have Nicholas Bonnett Murphy. And after Nicholas, we have Dana Christensen.
Can you guys hear me all right?
Yes.
Great. My name's Nick Bonnett Murphy, and my address is 4223 South 39th Street. I'm testifying in opposition to the proposed 2022 budget. When it comes to public safety, I have two expectations for my city leaders. Number one is to keep our city safe by keeping crime rates low, and number two is to use our tax money in the most efficient way possible. I'm going to throw out a couple of numbers really quick. In the last 10 years, we increased our police funding from $99 to $164 million, which is much, much more than the national average for similarly sized cities, even when accounting for population growth. But according to the Omaha Police's crime rate report from this July, we have not done a better job than those cities at reducing the rate of crime. We've been the same as or worse at reducing the incidence of rape, robbery, aggravated assault, theft, and vehicle theft. I know that several city council members, including my representative, Vinnie Palermo, pride themselves on being good business people. If you want to put it in business terms, our investment in the Omaha Police Department has a pretty terrible ROI. Throwing good money after bad every year into our police department might address the symptoms of crime, but it does nothing to solve the root causes of crime. I'm not trying to rag on the Omaha Police Department here. How are they supposed to solve inequity in education, poverty, drug abuse, and mental illness? Fixing the root causes of crime is not their job description, it's your job description. If Omaha was a business, it would be irresponsible to continue to pay so much money for such a small return. My expectation for the leaders of our city is that you spend our tax dollars in the most responsible and efficient way possible by putting a small portion of that money towards crime prevention instead of crime response. Mayor Stothert has asked you to approve $5.3 million increase to the police budget. Capital improvement projects add another $87 million. That's including $80 million for a new headquarters, $4 million for a new helicopter, and $3.2 million to build an outdoor shooting range. Here's another statistic that I hope you all will think about as you vote on this budget. According to Chief Schmaderer in the 2020 annual report for the Omaha Police Department, there are currently 1,017 untested sexual assault kits. At about $1,500 a piece, it would take $1.5 million to get all those kits tested. Let's skip the gun range and clear all of those untested rape kits. You'll still have another $1.5 million left over after that. Let's buy cheaper carpeting for the new headquarters and put that money towards Lasting Hope Recovery Center. Let's be a little bit more careful with the 2 helicopters we already have and put that $4 million into our lowest performing schools. You can call it divesting, you can call it defunding, you can call it whatever you want. What I'm talking about is fiscal responsibility. I don't want to give the police a higher proportion of our budget every year, only to look at the crime rate report in 2030 and see the exact same thing that I see today. Police respond to crime. Equitable access to quality schools, housing, and work support prevents crime. An ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. Actions speak louder than words. And what this budget shows me is that you care more about looking like you're doing something about crime than actually doing something to prevent crime. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. And no snapping, please. We want to maintain decorum in here and proceed through all of our testifiers to make sure they can be heard. Dana Christensen, please. After Dana will be Cole Christensen.
My name is Dana Christensen. I live at 2320 North 62nd Street in Omaha.
I'm here to speak in opposition to the proposed budget. Zachary Bareheels, we did the walk again this year. His family was there. I'm still here to report that they are without a son, a brother, an uncle, and a cousin. The police who sat on him, who tased him while he was restrained, faced no charges, and 3 of them retained their jobs after murdering him. You would think if we were going to spend this kind of money year after year, it would buy us some accountability, but it doesn't. Kenny Jones, murdered by police, shot while his back was turned. His family waited months for that footage to be released. That footage is paid for by body cams, paid for by this budget with body cams that are in the budget. It belongs to the taxpayers, and yet that footage was withheld. Other cities released similar footage the same week. You would think if we were going to continue to spend this type of money year after year, it would buy us some oversight, but it doesn't. Nigel Phillips dies while in police custody. Details remain unclear. Footage again attempted to not be given out, and in fact, they say they don't have it. Died from legit fear of the Omaha Police Department. That was a proximate cause of his fleeing and subsequent death. You would think if we were going to spend this type of money year after year, it would buy some faith and trust. Instead, what it buys us is they terrorize to death the very people that they are said to protect. We even spent the people's COVID relief budget on the police. While individuals in your communities, every one of your districts, struggled to survive. And what did we get for this theft and brazen display of power? Now, we don't get reduced crime. The stats you just heard, it doesn't do anything. We can't even get our protectors to wear a mask and get a vaccine. We're only a year away from July 25th, where the police arrested 120 individuals, illegally detained them, and tortured them. And to what end? There were very few, if any, charges because of that incident. That is a tremendous waste of our resources and time. And why? Because the police want to deter constitutionally protected speech. So what could we be spending our money on? I drive food assistance around the city. That's what I do to make a living. And I can tell you right now, there are people who are still hungry, despite what the people from the Sienna Francis House say, that are in all of your districts. The roads have potholes in them big enough where Gene Stothert could hide inside one in North Omaha. The housing is not acceptable. The OHA towers, none of you would spend a night there. Mental health, we couldn't even get 1%. Addiction, all of these things. So what I would like you to do is to defund the police and fund the people that you are sworn to protect. Thank you for the time.
Thank you. Cole Christensen, please. After Cole, we have Doug Patterson.
The name is Cole Christensen. I live at 6468 William Street. I'm speaking as an opponent to the budget, specifically the $5.3 million proposed to be allocated for the OPD budget increase. I'm going to start with a quote that I heard back in May from a commanding officer of OPD. "You better run, Bear." I heard this shout escape the lips of this commanding officer as he directed this threat in an unarmed, nonviolent, repeatedly target black activist as he pointed his nightstick at him. 30-plus OPD officers, in addition to this one, had pushed through and intentionally chosen not to detain a comparatively sized crowd of white demonstrators, all guilty of the same alleged offense as Bear, provably in a targeted pursuit of him. This commanding officer did not order Bear to stop, freeze, or to get on the ground, as one would assume would be instructed in the instance of an arrest. This high-ranking officer instead brandished a weapon, pointed it at the individual, and told him he better run. In case this is somehow not apparent, I'm telling you as a witness to this event, as someone who saw the look in that officer's eyes and the snarl of his voice as he shouted this, the implication was clear. If you do not run, this nightstick is about to be used on you. I have personally now been witness to 3 other instances in this last year alone in which Bear has been brutalized, similarly threatened, and unlawfully detained by OPD. I'm asking you, as sitting members of the City Council, to take a moment to consider the legitimacy of that violent threat from the standpoint of Mr. Alexander. I'm asking you to visualize the remainder of this situation, one that can be confirmed with OPD's own body cam footage through his eyes. Bear stood no more than 10 feet from the raised nightstick and V-shaped, quickly approaching line of armed officers, which broke formation around me as they began to full sprint after him, now doing exactly as he had been instructed, to run. Mr. Alexander was chased from our group, quickly isolated by a handful of officers. Having lost my second civil disobedience trial a week prior to this moment, I tell you truthfully, only the overwhelming legitimate fear for my friend's safety was enough to override my fear of another arrest and prompted me to pursue the group of officers. As I approached the scene, Bear lay face down in the grass, hands cuffed, with 2 officers on his back while exclaiming, "All right, you got me." In response, Officer Saldo lifted his knee from Bear's back, explaining, "I'm going to tase you." Had that taser not been turned on me for my interference, that is exactly what would have happened to an already cuffed man detained in violation of the ACLU's federal lawsuit 1 against OPD after July 25th, mandating nonviolent demonstrators be cited, not detained. While canvassing at my doorstep in April, Danny Bagley defended his support of further police funding by explaining that he had 4 daughters that he needed to keep safe. Danny, I heard your dog whistle. I counter it with this: I may not have daughters, but in solidarity with my black friends like Bear, black employers like Cammie Watkins, and my black boyfriend, all of whom I love, a love that is as valid and true in the love you feel for your daughters, but whose safety is actually impacted by the reinforced behavior of OPD tactics like that of the commanding officers that night. By a vote in support of this budget increase today, I am asking you to address the root causes of issues. Look up the Brookings Institute study that was a 60-year national study.
Cole, that's time, if you can summarize real quick.
Yes, that there is no correlation between increased police spending and a lowered crime rate. And as Chief Schmaderer said, ironically, at the John Lewis Votercade event, that John Lewis was his hero. I'd like to thank him and his department for my 3 arrests in a year for the good trouble that he supposedly is a huge fan of. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Doug Patterson. And after Doug, we'll have Cassandra Kernick.
Good evening. My name is Doug Patterson. I live at 2502 North 51st Avenue in Omaha, Nebraska, and I rise to oppose police funding. In 1789, the United States Constitution established enslavement and no women's participation in U.S. politics, elections and otherwise. We were divided into white and people of color from the very start. It is said there are a few bad police officers, but most are good cops. I offer a decidedly strong, different analysis. There are no good police officers. I say that because of what police officers are hired to do: protect the property structures of the rich, privileged white men who since 1789 preside over a relentlessly racist, sexist, class-divided nation. This includes Omaha, just like in 1789. When 1% or 0.1% of the nation's rich white men, own 70 or 75 or 80% of the nation's wealth, then A, that's not democracy regardless of how you cut it. And B, when that much wealth is hoarded away among a minuscule few, there's not much left when you get to the rest, certainly not poor people of color. So what police are hired to do above all across the U.S. is to tamp down the generational rage by patrolling the streets all the time to protect in Omaha the property of the rich and privileged out west and downtown. The rich and privileged don't want any discontent to get out of hand or to come near them. That's what the cops are for. First of all, protecting the structures of rich white privilege. So there are no good cops. And I doubt police have been informed of this. But that's also what those damn helicopters are for. We live near 52nd and Radial Highway, and I say to my friends who live beyond 90th Street in Whiteville, hey, what do you think of those helicopters going overhead all day? And they say, what helicopters? I can't help but think how kids in North Omaha, who grow up with the warships zooming over day after day, how does that cut into them? And how does that stain their souls when they know that you kids are criminals? So you're going to celebrate the wonderful anti-racist insurrections that followed the killing of George Floyd with adding yet another gunship helicopter to the war effort. Nice gesture, Mayor Stofford and acolytes.
Thank you. Cassandra, please. After Cassandra, we'll have Apollo Bythrow.
Hi, I'm Cassandra Kernick. I live at 4923 Cass Street in Councilmember Festerson's district. Last year, I spoke about the violence and white supremacy perpetuated by OPD. While I still believe this is the biggest issue facing our community, I'd like to use this time to speak on something that continues to impact this state and our city budget: brain drain. I'm especially qualified to talk about this as a born and bred Cornhusker. I attended university in Lincoln and have been renting here in Omaha for 5 years. I have a career, I go out to eat way more than my budget app says I should, I plant flower baskets with the neighborhood association, and I've been saving to buy a home. I say all of this to show you that I'm invested in this community. However, in the past year, I've paused my home search, partially because of a lack of affordable housing, and partially because of our local government's inability to dream bigger than the status quo. One poignant example of this is how 30 of the $59 million of our city's CARES Act funding was allotted to police wages. At a time when our neighbors were literally sick and dying and hungry and facing eviction, we pumped COVID funds into police instead of people. And now the mayor wants to do it again by giving the police a raise. OPD does not need more funding. While our population has increased by 18% since 2005, police funding has increased by 55.6% in that same time frame, and crime rates are worse or stagnant. This isn't and shouldn't be a surprise, as the data shows that police do not reduce crime and do not make communities safer. Affordable housing, mental health care, and decreasing poverty prevents crime. Instead of giving OPD a $5.3 million raise, let's reallocate these funds into a mental health responder program that does not send police to a crisis. Look to Cahoots or Cure Violence for inspiration. We do not want the co-responder program we have now. What happened to Zachary Bear Heels isn't a one-time tragedy. Since 2015, 1 in 4 of the 6,000 people murdered by police were experiencing a mental health crisis. We do not want officers with loaded guns responding when vulnerable people need help. So how does this relate to brain drain? Myself and many others are planning our futures, deciding if we want to put down roots or move now that we can work remotely. I can tell you that property taxes don't come up in our discussions, but Omaha's failure to dream bigger does. We're considering cities where the local government is trying new things, where the overall attitude isn't that we, the people, are too late in the process to make a difference, where our voices and big ideas in our literal lives are valued. If you want to keep hemorrhaging talented people to forward-thinking cities, vote yes on this budget. If you want a chance at keeping us here, try something new. Oppose this budget and invest in imaginative solutions and a future where Omaha is actually equitable for all to live. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Apollo, please. After Apollo, we'll have Amanda Harris.
Hi, my name's Apollo Bythrow. I live at 2940 Woolworth Ave. I'm speaking as an opponent to the proposed budget. There are many things that are wrong with the budget as it has been proposed, but I want to focus on just one of them. The police have been allocated far too much funding in this proposed budget, and I want to see a portion of that taken away from the police and put towards a mental health emergency response program that is separate from the Omaha Police Department. I'm aware that there is already a co-responder program that OPD uses to deploy mental health responders to emergency calls. However, the current program has a lot of flaws. The main issue is that the co-responder model still requires police presence to these calls. If our community members are in a time of crisis and having a mental health crisis, They don't need to deal with the threat of violence or being brutalized or being arrested as a result of that. We should be investing in the safety of our community members instead of having them potentially traumatized further from the police being called. The police should not be involved in mental health response, period. There are countless examples we've already talked about, several testifiers have already talked about Zachary Bear Heels, and there are countless other examples of citizens being brutalized or murdered in their time of need by the police. The way to stop this is funding a program for mental health response that's completely separate from the Omaha Police Department. In support of this idea, I'm asking City Council to divert $5 million from the proposed police budget into a program that is separate from the police department for mental health emergency response. I'm asking you to be imaginative in the ways that we can support our community. Thank you.
Thank you. Amanda, please. Is Amanda Harris here?
Hello, my name is Amanda Harris, and I reside at 2940 Woolworth Avenue. I speak today to oppose the plan and name some concerns as a member of the community. In my personal experience with family domestic violence, police response tend to only result in arrest and do not offer any actual help or rehabilitation. Omaha needs options for all first response situations, and that need to be completely separate from OPD, and will help rather than harm people that are already in disparate situations. As many people know, OPD murdered Zachary Bear Heels on June 5th, 2017 as a result of police response to a mental health call. It has been years since this occurred, but there has been no change for adequate emergency responses and options for the people of Omaha. I'm also deeply disturbed by the proposal of an increase to the police budget, as the police department was only recently, within the last year, sued by ACLU for the results of their mass arrest. This arrest held several peaceful protesters in very overcrowded spaces during a global pandemic, which, I find that absolutely disgusting. And I'm concerned that we want to give these people more money as opposed to protecting the civil liberties of our community. It's up to our local government to keep the safety and liberty of our citizens at the forefront of the work and build the budget accordingly. For this reason, I am proposing the reallocation of funds to mental health, citizen public transportation trafficking, and housing. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. Next, we have Teresa Summerlin. After Teresa will be Taylor Thornburg.
My name is Teresa Summerlin, and I live at 717 North 89th Plaza. Good evening, President Festerson and City Council members. A review of spending on state and local police over the past 60 years shows no correlation nationally between spending and crime rates. Instead, research addressing economic insecurity is the key factor in reducing crime. Due to Mayor Stothard's false narrative linking policing to community safety, she proposes increasing an already overinflated budget by $5.3 million. Cities around the country have recently been re-examining the practices of policing and then shuffling priorities away from policing and into initiatives that improve the safety of citizens. It is past time for Omaha to do the same. In fact, across the country, we have witnessed the police actively perpetuating violence disproportionately against Black, Brown, and Indigenous people. Black people are 3 times more likely to be killed by police than white people. 3 times. Most police perpetuated killings start in response to a non-violent instance, such as a traffic stop or a mental health call. This was demonstrated right here in Omaha with the police killing of Zachary Bear Heels, and then more recently, Kenneth Jones. Divestiture of the OPD budget is the way to reduce crime in Omaha. I am asking the City Council to reallocate $15 million of police funds to non-police community programs. That includes $5 million to start an unarmed civilian traffic safety program, $3 million for a support team assisted response program similar to the program that was piloted in Denver, Colorado in 2020, $4 million for affordable housing, $2 million for parks, libraries, and youth programs, $1 million for workforce development. A little over a year ago, OPD used a kettling technique to illegally arrest over 120 people on the Farnham Street Bridge. They were demonstrating their constitutional right to peacefully protest racial injustice. OPD used chemical agents that night on peaceful demonstrators that included children. I was one of those individuals. I have witnessed firsthand the brutality and incompetence of OPD, not only on the Farnham Street Bridge, but also on the corner of 72nd and Dodge. On the night of May 30th, 2020, OPD, without warning, fired tear gas, pepper balls, and stun grenades into a peaceful crowd of demonstrators that also included children. Omaha deserves strong leadership that will invest in programs that actually protect its citizens. There's an old saying, if you always do what you've always done, you'll always get what you've always got. This seems to be Mayor Stothard's motto. Now is the time to break from her tired and ineffective budget. Also,
Teresa, that's
less
the red light. Can we
parking
have it summarized?
and more bike lanes, please. Thank you
Gotcha.
for your time.
Thank you. Good summary. Next testifier, Taylor. Taylor Thornburg. After Taylor will be Brianna Full.
Good evening. My name is Taylor Thornburg. I'm at 5004 Davenport Street, number 16, Omaha, Nebraska 68132. Everyone else, hop on your phones and answer some emails. I'm speaking directly to my City Councilman, Pete Festerson, tonight. At around this time last year, August 11th, 2020, I came to City Hall to ask you to defund the police. Just a month before, you proposed Resolution 2020-0677, which said, as a community, we must have serious continuing conversations about racism and injustice, inequality, economic disparities, and police-community relations. And Omaha City Council must provide a public platform to engage all of our citizens in a discussion of positive action steps to address racism, injustice, inequality, economic disparities, and police-community relations. What reason did I have to believe you wouldn't do the right thing? You can imagine my surprise when you suggested instead we draw $1.8 million from Omaha's cash reserve rather than defund the police. You can imagine my surprise again when the proposed 2021 city budget suggested increasing Omaha's police budget by another $2 million to $164 million. Last year, I came to City Council to correctly call out OPD as a deranged pack of oppressive, racist dogs. I thought they were the worst there could be. Today I stand corrected, Pete Festerson. You are a sly, snake oil-selling sneak of a fox. In 1963, Malcolm X said a few words about you. He said, the white liberal is the worst enemy to America and the worst enemy to the black man. White liberals are foxes who show their teeth and pretend that they are smiling. As black men run from the growling wolf, he flees into the jaws of the open, smiling fox. Despite one black man who shot himself in Omaha's jail out of desperation this year, despite another black man who killed himself at an Omaha traffic stop out of desperation this year, despite the black man Kenneth Jones who was killed by police in a helpless situation this year, despite the white Roberto Silva Jr. who shot 4 people and knifed more in jail, who the police saw fit to arrest alive this year, you will demur, you will deflect, but you will never defund, because you are no more than a sly, snake oil-selling sneak of a fox. At least the police are honest. They are a vicious pack of dogs, and they take no steps to disguise it. You are something worse. Do us all a favor. Do not demur. Do not deflect. Do not deny. Defund the police. Defy my expectations, and save us all the trouble, and skin yourself. There may be a man worth more than the fox fur underneath. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker is Brianna Full. After Brianna is Naomi Gilbert.
Hello.
Welcome.
Okay, so my name is Brianna Full, Briannafull, and I live at 603 North 36th Street. In 2020, I graduated with my degree in public health, and I'm currently in my second year in my master's degree in public administration, both earned at UNO. I have been a community organizer in Omaha for 3 years, focusing on improving the holistic health of communities, especially those of minority populations. Today, I'm here to voice my concern about the increase in funding to the Omaha Police Department. I can tell you plainly that giving the OPD more money will not make Omaha a safer place. The city should be investing in recognizing that violence is a public health issue and addressing the root causes of why violence happens. Violence is not random. It is predictable and preventable. That is why we see higher rates of violence in communities that have historically been disenfranchised on a systematic level. Though the OPD has seen a 25.7% increase in funding from 2016 to 2019, Omaha's high crime rates have remained stagnant or increased. Funneling more money into the OPD is dangerous for communities of color when you are not drastically increasing funding to address the root causes of violence. Additionally, I'd like to talk about how there is no accountability of the Omaha Police Department when they step out of line, and there hasn't been for many years now. For example, in 2005, when the city had a public safety auditor, they fired her after releasing a report claiming OPD's unfair treatment of minority Omaha residents when conducting their traffic stops. I had the opportunity last year to ask the police chief at that time, Mr. Thomas Warren over there, why he didn't take the report more seriously. And he said the report was based on unsubstantiated claims, even though the public safety auditor clearly states where the data was pulled from and spent 5 years gathering this information and testimony from the public themselves. Even when the city itself had the data, they refused to address the wrongdoings of the Omaha Police Department. More recently, over 120 people were brutally arrested last summer for peacefully protesting racial injustice in Omaha, and it was found in the court of law that the OPD indeed violated the people's right to protest. So, what were the consequences of this action? The city increased the 2021 police budget by 4.8% and has planned to add $5.3 million more in 2022. I'm pleading with you to please take a second look at increasing the OPD budget and invest in the prevention of violence. I hope that you will not remain complicit in the continued violence that OPD inflicts on my community.
Thank you. Naomi Gilbert, please. After Naomi, we'll have Isabella Manhart.
Hello, City Council members. My name is Naomi Gilbert, Noemi Gilbert, and I reside at 530 South 51st Avenue in Omaha. I'm speaking today to oppose the proposed city budget for next year. Compassion is a human right. No matter the actions one has taken, the symptoms one has suffered from or is suffering from, and the situation one has experienced, everyone deserves care that is rooted in evidence and kindness. Namely, not being surrounded by armed officers during a mental health crisis, as far too many Omahans have. The police department budget has risen 63% over the past 11 years, despite the fact that Omaha's population has only risen by 17%, and despite the fact that greater funding for police is not correlated with a reduction in crime. An increase in police funding does not mean an increase in community safety. True community safety includes affordable housing, compassionate care for the vulnerable members of our community, people who are unhoused, people experiencing addiction, people in mental health crises. True community safety means that every single resident has clean water and food and medical care. True community safety means that people are not criminalized for addiction and homelessness. True community safety means defunding, divesting, from the police department. It is often said that police protect young women. Danny Begley, my councilperson, has said this. I'm 15 years old. I've been harassed and catcalled in Omaha. Hear it straight from a young woman's mouth, who they say they will protect. The police do not protect me and my friends, particularly my Black, brown, and disabled friends. You are not protecting young women. You are protecting white supremacy. I'm asking you to oppose the proposed budget and invest in our mental health resources in our community. Thank you.
Thank you. Isabella Manhart. After Isabella, we have Kyra Britt.
Hello, my name is Isabella Manhart. I reside at 3724 Gordon Street in District 3, and I'm an Omaha area public high school student speaking today in opposition to the proposed budget and the increase in police funding. I want to live in a safe city, but I know that public safety is rooted in economic security, not in how much taxpayer money is spent on the police. I want to see money invested in services that aid my peers and their families. My own representative, Councilman Begley, as well as the representatives in my neighboring districts, campaigned on affordable housing, workforce development, and public transportation. These are all valuable services that more effectively address the root causes of crime and violence in our communities, and I expect that my representatives will stay true to their word and take steps to emphasize these services in the 2022 budget. I ask that you oppose the budget plan and propose instead that the $5.3 million proposed increase in the police budget be reallocated with the following amendments. $4 million reallocated to increasing safe, affordable housing, and $1 million invested in job-seeking services. I also ask that money from the capital fund be spent on an expanding orbit busing between North and South Omaha as a safe and consistent source of transportation for students and families. Safe housing, jobs, and transportation to those jobs and schools are some of the basic needs of Omaha families within and beyond my district. These needs have been made more dire by the pandemic, and they're the needs that the proposed budget will not effectively fulfill. Community safety is circumstantial, and studies have shown time and time again that there's no correlation between increased police spending and safer communities. At a time when our communities and our students are trying to bounce back and adapt to life during a global pandemic, increasing police expenditures is irresponsible and at odds with the needs of the public. As a leader in my school's political organization, I know that young people in this city are more politically engaged than ever before, and we are committed to holding our representatives accountable for making the changes in this budget that will lead to positive changes in our city, not just increasing police wages. My peers and I know the city's job is to work for us, and we will firmly oppose this budget in increasing police spending at the detriment of the economic and educational security of Omaha students and families. So I ask you to oppose this budget proposal and to take the investments and the steps necessary to make our communities safer by addressing the root causes of this community violence. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Kyra Britt. Hope I'm saying that correctly. After that, we have Alana Elder.
Hi, my name is Kira Britt. I live at 5005 Cass Street. I am speaking in opposition to the proposed 2022 city budget, and more specifically to the increase in police funding. As an Omaha public high school student, I understand that a quality education has the potential to prevent crime from occurring in the first place. Research from the University of Western Ontario has shown that policies that increase high school completion rates or that improve school quality and early childhood learning opportunities, especially in disadvantaged communities, reduce crime. In fact, a study from UC Berkeley estimates that a mere 1% increase in the high school completion rate of men in the U.S. would save the country up to $1.4 billion annually as a result of reduced crime. If you want to make our tax dollars count, reallocate a portion of the proposed police funds to Omaha's education system to ensure all OPS students receive an equitable education. Not surprisingly, access to safe and engaging public facilities and programs also reduces crime. After New York City's Bryant Park was renovated in 1985 to host more activities and events, crime in the area decreased by 92%. And a study in Chicago found that 52% fewer crimes were reported near buildings surrounded by trees and other vegetation. This is why I am also requesting that $2 million be invested in Omaha's parks, libraries, and youth programs instead of police. On a national scale, there is not a correlation between increased police funding and reduced crime rate. We do know, however, that programs and initiatives that provide quality education, improved transportation, affordable housing, parks, libraries, and safe facilities and engaging programs for youth have the power to prevent crime from occurring in the first place. Let's invest in that. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker is Alana. After Alana is Mike Huber.
Hello, my name is Ellen Elder, and I live at 5624 Leavenworth Street, Omaha, Nebraska 68106. Now, you guys have already heard a bunch of stuff today about how we should not increase police funding, and I agree with that. But I'm going to talk more about how we should invest in public transportation and more protected bike lanes in Omaha. We have one so far, and it's great. I love biking on it. It makes me feel protected. And I know a lot of other people have taken to biking down that road because they feel protected. But I've also talked to a ton of people who've decided they don't want to bike around the city because they don't feel safe. Bike lanes themselves are wonderful, but protected bike lanes are even better because people feel comfortable taking their children out biking. And the biking around the city is both good for those biking, but it's also good for the city itself. It decreases, I'm so sorry, I completely forgot a word.
Doing fine.
Yeah, it does decrease emissions. It decreases traffic. That's the word, I'm sorry. It decreases traffic, and it just makes the city more pleasant as a whole. So please do not agree to the budget as though it is currently. Thank you.
Thank you. Mike Huber. After Mike, we'll have Sharina Lim.
Council members and council presidents, I'm a regular working class guy. I watch soccer and I go to work. And
Mike, your address too for the record?
5264 Northwest Radial, so I'm in your district.
Great.
Normally I don't focus a lot on what the city council is doing, but in this particular case, I think that the police budget is too high, as we've heard today. More funding to police doesn't reduce crime. Crime is not caused by a low police budget. It's caused by bad economics and people without chances. So crime is about property most of the time. It's not about violence, but we're sending police officers who are trained to respond to violence. We could use the $5 million in this proposed increase to instead fund something like STAR from Denver, which sends mental health professionals to mental health calls instead of police officers. In their first few months, they handled 750 calls, and all of them went without injury or arrest. Another example of alternative uses for police funds is the Traffic Safety Division in Minneapolis, which is unarmed traffic enforcement. We've heard the names of the unfortunate people, Zachary Bearheels and Kenneth Jones and Mike Taylor. They didn't need a police officer to come to them. They needed help with something. Or, it was a traffic stop and they didn't need to get shot because of a traffic stop. So unarmed traffic safety and mental health professionals, these people would still be here. But sending the police ended up in a situation where people are dead because of the policies of the city. Police aren't the answer to every problem, and they'll tell you that themselves. So, when someone needs a person, when a person needs a shoulder to cry on, you wouldn't send the Hulk, and when they're not driving correctly, you don't need to send the Punisher. So I'm asking you to vote no on this current budget and amend the $5 million to go towards something more like STAR. Thank you.
Thank you. Sharina, hopefully I'm saying that correctly. Thanks for the phonetic spelling there.
Hi, my name is Sharina Lim. I live at 1402 South 13th Street, Omaha, Nebraska 68106. I exist in the community as a soft but angry Filipina American with a heart for women's health, particularly maternal health. I am a medical professional in obstetrics and gynecology in Northeast Omaha. My everyday life consists of working with pregnant people and caring for them throughout their pregnancies and beyond. Now, I want all of you to listen to me very carefully. Increasing our city's police department budget will negate all of the work that I and countless others do. How? You're probably wondering. I'll explain. Birth equity, for those who are unfamiliar, is an attainable concept with which all people with the ability to get pregnant have access to resources to achieve healthy pregnancies and have positive, happy outcomes. In our country, a person's zip code has a more profound impact on their health than does their DNA. Omaha is famously segregated, and our Black and brown communities are far more policed than white communities. Last year, DHHS found that while Omaha is only 12.3% Black, our Black mamas are 2 to 3 times more likely to have severe health conditions related to pregnancy and or die from childbirth than our white mamas. This is birth inequity. My patients live in highly policed areas. My patients are homeless. My patients have severe mental health issues. Having more police with more money to do more damage to the communities I serve will have detrimental effects on my patients and their families, our families. Successful, happy communities do not care for their matriarchs by policing them. They thrive because of abundant resources and helpful community programs and initiatives. Instead of giving the police department more than a quarter of our city's entire budget, why don't we give more money to the community programs and initiatives? Why don't we give money to moms who literally and figuratively carry our communities, our city, our country on their shoulders? Can you imagine what our city could be like if we took actual steps to take care of our mothers the way that we say we do? I know I can. I promise you that we won't get there by giving cops even more of an opportunity to traumatize, incarcerate, and murder our moms. We'll get there by providing true equity. Thank you for hearing me tonight.
Thank you. Next, we have Jaden Perkins. After Jaden will be Sarah Johnson.
Good evening. My name is Jaden Perkins. I am a grassroots community organizer and local political operative. I am here today to oppose the
Jaden,
proposed...
just your address too for that.
3325 Riverview Boulevard. To oppose the proposed 22 budget on the grounds that Mayor Gene Stothert has failed to craft a moral, sustainable budget yet again. The Omaha Police Department is projected to increase by $5.3 million next year at a time when the community is suffering from economic anxiety, a healthcare crisis, a housing crisis, rising crime, and ongoing racial disparities when it comes to traffic stops. The question that needs to be raised today is why should a department that is led by a chief who doesn't even live in city limits illegally spies on innocent activists fighting for bold structural change? And let's talk about a police union president who continues to publicly disparage our Black and brown communities, signs off on racist campaign mailers, and continues to spread disinformation about life-saving COVID vaccines, even though he almost died from the disease itself. Make it make sense. It doesn't. And now, y'all want to make sure that the public can't hear their scanners anymore. This is totally and utterly unacceptable. The reality is 6 out of 7 of y'all were endorsed by the police, and the fact is, most of all, barely won your elections in the case of Danny Begley, and in the case of Amy Melton, you barely won your re-election. So when y'all are up for re-election in 2025, we will remember the path you chose to take on this budget and future budgets. On May 22nd of this year, me and my fellow organizers from the Revolutionary Action Party were targeted and arrested for peacefully protesting outside the OPOA union headquarters. The police immediately instigated the situation as soon as we marched towards the Union Hall. When we dispersed, they continued to chase us back to public property. They called Bear out by name and chased him down. After that, I got in my vehicle to follow the police down to the jail. As soon as we pulled back up to the Union Hall, an officer reached into my vehicle and said, "We want to take you to jail," and then proceeded to forcibly pull me out of my car by my neck and hair. Then they violated me by aggressively ripping my ponytail out of my hair. I am livid, frustrated, and disgusted by this carceral system that continuously perpetuates violence and oppression against Black and brown organizers who consistently speak out against police violence. That's exactly what we saw and see all the time, police violence against Black and brown organizers. The community is here today because we have had enough of inefficient and ignorant government, because we believe in people over profits and investing in the marginalized over the privileged few. Budgets are moral documents, and if you vote yes on this budget, you are anything but. Thank you.
Thank you. Sarah, and then we have Nathaniel Rulo.
Hi, I'm Sarah Johnson, 2316 North 52nd Street. I am definitely an opponent of this budget and CIP. I'm going to focus on street safety. I've heard a lot about police issues. I'll touch on some of that. First of all, I'd like to see the proposed OPD funding increase actually go to community care initiatives and unarmed civilian response teams. We need to start taking responsibilities away from the already overwhelmed police department. Every year, the budget goes up for the police, but unfortunately, as we've heard countless times tonight, it's not correlated with lowering crime. I think there's 3 specific areas right away we need to redirect from OPD's purview to other unarmed departments. None of these are new ideas. They can all be replicated from what's happening and working elsewhere. Unarmed traffic monitors. Traffic stops turn deadly. We've heard that tonight. Particularly for our Black and brown neighbors, we don't need armed officers to deal with expired plates or other minor traffic infractions. 2, mental health crisis response. Again, you've heard STAR and CAHOOTS a lot tonight. I hope the message is getting through. The community does not want armed police officers showing up to mental health crisis. It escalates, not de-escalates, and I hope you're hearing us. This is actually conflicting with a mental health listening session tonight with the county. Poor planning on someone's part to not collaborate with the county, but rather conflict. I hope you're all hearing. We really want help with mental health. All of us are hurting. All right, homeless outreach team. You've probably heard about that. Again, there's other entities elsewhere that are working. We don't need to continue to criminalize people. We need to help them by actually addressing the funding of root causes, not reaction, being proactive. We can actually solve some of these issues. Okay, my real issues with the CIP. We just had a ribbon cutting on the Harney Street bike lane, the only protected bike lane in the city. We've been begging for that for a decade. It's been in and out of the CIP. It was built with private funding this time. It was built in a month after being talked about for a decade. I don't see one single penny for protected bike lanes in the CIP. Conversely, we have $129 million dedicated to storing people's cars. If we're wondering why people are leaving this community, we've heard a lot of reasons, but I'm just going to add that to it. We heard people from Central High talking about how they finally feel safe riding on our streets. You want to deal with parking issues? Don't make everyone drive places. All right, road widening is another issue. There's bazillions of dollars, that is an exaggeration, going to road widening and intersection widening. Are you familiar? You can't answer questions, but look into induced demand. If you build it, they will come. Same thing goes for street widening. You can't widen your way out of traffic congestion. What you can do is think more reasonably about land allotments. What we need to do is let folks travel without dependency on cars, bike, walk, bus, vibrant options that involve active transportation. That's something we need to get serious about, and this budget is baloney when it comes to that. The CIP is a total slap in the face to Vision Zero, Complete Streets. The Connect Go initiatives just laid out 100 miles of new bike lanes, and we don't have one penny in the CIP for the next 6 years. I'm very grateful that Pete Festerson said he would allocate $3 million. I'd like to see it be $10 million. Thank you.
Thank you. Nathaniel, please. After Nathaniel is Autumn Bythrow.
Nathaniel Rulo, 3935 Arbor Street, Omaha, Nebraska, 68105. I'm here to oppose the proposed city budget for next year. Through votes and actions that the city council has done, you've made it clear that you're not abolitionists and that you don't want to defund the police. I hear that. I see that. I'm asking y'all to hear the people, to remember the voices and the stories of those who came during the height of a global pandemic here, risking their health and others to try to stop y'all from giving the OPD additional millions of our budget last year. I want you to hear the people and see and listen to these real stories of police brutality, corruption, and brutal killings committed by the Omaha Police Department. I need you to oppose this budget and find something better. That's not even meeting halfway many of the calls you've heard from us to do better. It's the bare minimum. Something good that you can do for our city, and more importantly, something good that you can do for the people. Stop giving OPD millions of additional dollars every year. I've heard this in here before, but if an employee has a history of failure and breaking store policy, and for some reason you won't fire them, you sure shouldn't be giving them millions of dollars of a raise every year. The OPD has been just fine spending a year beating, terrorizing, and harassing people with the money that they already have. Stand up to the bullies. Don't let the union and the mayor scare you with talk of red tape and the extra time it'll take to reevaluate the budget. That extra time could save a life. Any red tape cannot be worse than the many lawsuits the OPD cost the city with their make-it-go-away settlements and court dates from illegal arrests and court dates from horrific killings. Change is hard work. Do the work. Push them to do better. Zachary Bareheels still sees no justice, no accountability. Not for the 12 times he was tased, or when he was beaten on the ground with his hands cuffed behind his back, or when they took his life away, his future, when they took him from his family and his people. The additional money in this budget will go to a corrupt department where 3 of his killers work, reinstated last year while cops tear-gassed kids and arrested journalists. Meet me less than halfway. Consider the year's worth of evidence of OPD failure, put in a little extra work for the good of our city, and don't approve this budget. Put that money towards alternative methods of community service, a STAR emergency response group, affordable housing, youth programs, workforce development. Those are programs that help people. OPD protects property, not people. Thank you.
Thank you. Next we have Autumn Bythrow. After Autumn, we have Ash Bonanzik.
My name is Autumn Bythrow, and I live at 1313 Beechwood Avenue, Papillion, Nebraska, and I'm an opponent of the 2022 budget. I'm here because during protests last summer, Omaha police discharged chemical weapons, including tear gas and pepper bullets, and arrested citizens en masse. In fact, it got so brutal, OPD got sued by the ACLU for using excessive force. These people OPD brutalized and arrested are my friends, family, and neighbors, and I'm testifying in opposition of the 2022 budget because the fact that we spend over a third of tax dollars on police is absurd and unnecessary. People in this community absolutely need safety and protection, but it's been proven time and time again that police are not what keeps communities safe. Based on a study done by the Washington Post over 60 years of data, there's no correlation between police funding and violent crime rates. However, studies by the Brookings Institute point to economic security leading to lower crime rates. I'd like to point out that when we're discussing safety, we need to acknowledge that actually keeping people safe includes having people's essential needs met. With this in mind, I propose we divest $4 million from the police and invest into housing initiatives for unhoused Omaha residents. Some may believe affordable housing and other projects for economic security are for nonprofits to deal with, not the government, but if we agree that safety and protection is the role of our government and economic security makes people safe, then Omaha is absolutely Omaha's safety and housing is absolutely within our government's responsibility. Thank you.
Thank you. Ash, please. Next, we would have Wyatt Smith.
Hello, I'm Ash Benajic, 524 South 36, Omaha, Nebraska, 68105. I'm in the 3rd District. We've heard a lot today about the police budget. If you look on page 146 of the 475-page budget report, you'll see that we spend 37.9%, well over a third of our funding on our police budget. I'm a business person, and our return on investment is simply not good enough. When I look at what other things could be done with that money, I see climate change initiatives, I see community housing initiatives, I see homeless initiatives, public restrooms, bike lanes, bus lanes, and loads of other infrastructure that actually supports the community and gives us a hell of a lot more return on our investment. I would like to address climate change. We are seeing that our summers are getting longer and hotter. We are seeing that our wind is getting fiercer. 180,000 people were without power for days. This is partially due to the fact that our power lines are above ground. We need to bury them, and we need to get money in the budget for our public works to do that. We need to expand our bus lanes and our protected bike infrastructure. In order for citizens to stop using so much fossil fuels and have us breathe easier in Omaha, we need to have safe and reliable options for our community to use. If we want to stop investing in parking, if we want to stop investing in lane widening, we need to get cars off the road and get people to the places they need to go. I would ask that you also look at investing in e-bike sharing fleets. We have a great B-cycle program, and we need to expand those stations and those fleets because e-bikes make biking more accessible. Omaha has a lot of hills. If you've biked up the brand new protected bike lane, you'll notice you're gonna go up a few of them. And when you end, you will see that you end in Dewey, which is a heck of a hill to end on. I will say that for me, e-biking has made me be able to not have a car any longer. I also recommend that we allocate money for tree planting. It is seen that there are ambient temperature differences between communities that have high allotments of trees versus communities that don't. Several degrees of difference. This can make a sweltering summer feel a whole lot cooler if we only allow trees to grow in communities. Please consider these allocations. Thank you.
Thank you. Wyatt Smith, please. And after Wyatt, we have Lucia Pedroza.
Hi, my name is Wyatt Smith. I live at 5612 Emily Street, 68106. I'm part of District 3. I would like to oppose the police budget, mainly due to their lack of expertise when dealing with mental health crises. I'm asking you to divert funds from the OPD and use the proposed funds to start a pilot program similar to the one started in Lincoln. Lincoln, Nebraska has actually been partnering with the Whitebird Clinic, who created the Cahoots program that we're talking about. And it's not a full fix, but it's clearly a step in the right direction. I would also like to oppose the capital investment projects, new police headquarters, and would love to see that money spent towards a better power infrastructure. It is somewhat absurd that the OPD receives carte blanche while our power lines remain above ground. Your constituents will continue to lose power during powerful storms which will only worsen. We can either invest in a broken solution for a problem that is legally manufactured, or we can invest in a solution for a problem that is legitimate and worsening. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Lucia. And then following Lucia is Nick O'Connell.
Hello, everyone. My name is Lucia Pedrosa Estrada, and I reside at 3115 North 56th Street. My representative is Councilmember Pete Festerson, and today I'm here to testify in opposition to the proposed budget for the city of Omaha. I will share two instances that support my decision, although there are many, many reasons why we should fund more things like infrastructure, modernizing our communication and administrative systems, libraries, parks. I am a single mother of 2 young boys, and we were among many families impacted by the pandemic. Luckily, we didn't get COVID, but we, as many others, have been facing health and an economic crisis. This year, my vehicle was stolen right from outside my house as I was planning to take my kids to school, and they saw that, and we had to walk to school, and I had to figure it out right after. But this had never happened to us. I called 911. They directed me to a police officer, and nobody answered, so I left a voicemail. I tried again, and they directed me to another officer, and I filed a report, and all I got was a report number and someone on the other side telling me good luck. Nobody showed up at my house. Luckily, I still had auto insurance, and they helped me navigate the situation. I found it ironic that my insurance representative asked if any police had shown up to help me. No one came to my house. I don't know if any of you have ever experienced this before, but it's very traumatic. And as you've heard, it's very hard to get around Omaha without a vehicle. My car was stolen on March 19th, and in the meantime, I looked around for my car. I received a letter from the police on March 31st to notify me that my car was found at the impound lot, and it had been there for 4 days already. I called as soon as I saw it at 4:30 p.m., and they told me that I would have to pay more the next day if I would go get it because they were about to close, and I was already facing financial struggles. And the impound lot was going to close. Oh yeah, I said that already. And there was no way that I could make it there on time. So I lost my car due to damage that was done to it when they stole it. My insurance was able to cover some of the cost, and having these traumatic experiences can. Sorry, I lost. Yeah, it can send somebody back tremendously. As I mentioned before, I was already struggling financially, especially during a health and financial crisis such as the pandemic. I would have loved to have better support from the city. However, the message I received from the process our city has in place made me feel as though the city does not care about all residents equally. Sorry, my paper didn't print. But the second instance is my neighbor, who's about my age and lives alone next door. He is on the autism spectrum, and from time to time, he comes outside screaming because he needs something and has no way to get it himself. I have helped him before and have done my duty as a neighbor to have communication with his family. One morning, he was kicking my neighbor's doors, and they called the police. They didn't know he was on the spectrum. So when the police showed up, I was personally afraid because I'm a woman of color with a Black Lives Matter sign on my door. But they asked me if I knew who lived next to me, and I had my neighbor's family's contact info, so I shared it with them.
We do have the red light there if you can summarize.
Yes, I'm almost done. So I was hoping the police would be more prepared to handle these situations and know who they were looking for. I have seen how our budget continues to grow in support of funding the police, but we're not seeing any improvement in how that positively impacts our community overall. With such large increase in their funding, I would expect a lot more from our city services, and I feel disappointed to pay that our tax money is going to funding unnecessary overtime pay and surveillance and detaining of activists who are not criminals. I'm here today hoping that you hear us and understand that we are not here to call you out and just tell you that you're terrible human beings, but we're here to appeal to your humanity and understand that this pandemic has affected us all, and you have a chance to make it better. You have a chance as new elected officials who are making history to make our community better. So thank you.
Thank you. Nick O'Connell, please. After Nick, we have Julie Schrader.
My name is Nick O'Connell. My address is 6438 Vane Street, and I'm speaking against the proposed budget. I'm an organizer with Omaha Autonomous Action, a mutual aid collective that works to meet the survival needs of the local unhoused population from within the community. The majority of the folks we meet in the course of our work are part of what some would distinguish as chronic homeless, though we don't make that distinction. The reason we don't distinguish between chronic homelessness and regular homelessness is because the only thing that is chronic when it comes to homelessness is the chronic inability of this city to provide no barrier, accessible, and timely shelter to those experiencing homelessness. I don't know if any of you have applied for a Section 8 housing voucher lately, but if you go to their website, it says the wait is between 3 months and 3 years. Better yet, if you go to actually apply online, it says currently not accepting applications for housing vouchers. We were all here when the director from Sienna Francis came up and said that they were able to place 431 people in housing out of 2,000 plus applicants. Is that success? Is that what we consider success? I mean, just sit with that for a second. That's 1,600 plus people that they're in an emergency shelter for an extended period of time. The wait list is so long because of a massive lack of Section 8 housing available and the extraordinary amount of red tape to access those benefits. I don't see any rubber stamp tax incentive financing projects for housing projects. Just more and more strip malls that nobody asked for but developers. Those don't house people. Those don't feed people. And yet here we are discussing whether we should give another $5.3 million to the police while people fight for survival under tarps and living in tents on the streets of this city. Will that $5.3 million house anybody? Will that feed anybody? Will that do anything but continue to unjustly criminalize poverty, disproportionately the poverty of black and brown bodies? No, it won't. Many of those that choose to stay in tents away from the shelter do so because they don't feel safe at the shelter. Some have been raped, some have been robbed, some have been assaulted, some have gotten sick or watched friends die from COVID-19. If this city truly cared about solving the problem it has in caring for its most vulnerable people, it would invest in building more public housing and repairing the current public housing. The current public housing is absolutely abysmal. It would invest in public shelter systems outside of the nonprofit complex that have public oversight and actually have an incentive to solve the problems that we try and task them with. It would invest in programs like Together Inc. that provide a safe, stable, non-congregate shelter program that can help bridge the gap between emergency shelter and housing vouchers. It would invest in programs that give people ride to work, bed to sleep, and supplemental food, because once you get Section 8 housing, that's it. There's no additional food. There's no ride to work. There's no transportation to apply for these jobs.
We have the red light there. If you can summarize, please.
This is how we end the cycle of chronic disregard for our homeless community members. This is not a city council vote. This is a moral vote. Be better. Do better. Vote no on this budget. All power to the people.
Thank you. Julie Schrader, please. After Julie is Aaron Porterfield.
Some of you I can see over the computer, sorry. My name's Julie Schrader, and I'm the CEO and founder of Rejuvenating Women in Omaha, Nebraska. I don't want to publicly give out the address because we are a home that holds individuals who've been trafficked.
Are you comfortable giving your personal address? We do need to have that to be complicit with state law.
I'm sorry, say that again.
Are you comfortable giving your personal address?
No, the address of the organization.
Okay, please do that.
It's kind of a safe house where it's not public. I don't have it public. I have it written down on the sheet, but I just wanted to leave it out of the public.
All right, let me consult our city attorney
Thank you.
because we did design a whole new process around this to make sure we are complying with
Sure.
state law.
Yep,
Mr.
I understand.
Kuzi, could you advise, please?
Yep. Rejuvenating Women is I'm sorry.
One second, I asked our city attorney.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Matt Kuzi, City of Omaha
Make a
Law
judgment on that.
Department. Given the statement that was made today, it complies with the spirit, but not the letter of the law. So given that the intent of the law is to allow people such as this to withhold their address, I deem it to be a legitimate reason for her to withhold her address. So while she did not comply with the form and function, I think that the chair can excuse that and allow her to withhold her address and still be in conformity with the spirit of the law.
Thank you. I agree with that, and we'll allow it. But just so folks know, there is a new process that several folks have signed up for tonight that we'll get to here in a moment. that requires you to register just one day in advance if you don't want to provide your address, and that's how that process works.
Okay, that's good to know.
Thank you.
Thank you very
Proceed.
much. Thanks for that. Rejuvenating Women is a nonprofit organization providing hope and restoration to those enslaved in human trafficking. We are committed to developing long-lasting relationships with girls and women who are deeply traumatized by meeting her right where she is at in her life. We help them by restoring their physical, emotional, and their spiritual health. We raise awareness of human trafficking in Omaha, Nebraska, and surrounding communities. Our team of dedicated staff and volunteers invest in the lives of each individual living in the recovery residential home, as well as those participating in other programs or services that we offer, which we do offer short and long-term programming up to 2 years, and we do offer individuals to come for just day only. Rejuvenating Women believes in a multidisciplinary team approach and tailor the best possible care for each survivor and prevention of future human trafficking. Rejuvenating Women also uses curriculum integration, which focuses primarily on the different disciplines and the diverse perspectives they bring to illustrate a topic, theme, or issue. I thank you in the past for providing funds out of this budget for Rejuvenating Women. This year we are for this proposed budget for 2022. We're hoping that we can have a portion of those funds allotted to our program so that we can help further help individuals who've been trafficked. There's only 33 residential programs currently operating at this time in the United States, only 33, and our home's one of those 33. There are currently only 682 beds in the United States. We have 10 of those beds. There's not nearly enough resources for human trafficked victims. And according to Polaris, there was a 40% increase of trafficking in April 2020 compared to April 2019 due to COVID-19. Rejuvenating Women, we saw a 38% increase in 1 month because of COVID. 98% of the program participants, they're in 160.5 hours of therapy and programming every single month. 96% of the program participants are learning life skills, 24.5 hours each month. And 100% of the program participants are connected with 14 to 25 healthy and safe people that provide them and continue to build them up even after they are finished with their program. 89% of program participants in 2020 had therapy breakthroughs, maintained sobriety, obtained their GED, received driver's license, paid off debt, went to school, and or found a job or career. 280 of those individuals reached out to Rejuvenating Women for help in 2020 alone. And 118 so far have reached out to us for help from January 1st to July 1st of 2021. So today I do ask you, I'm for the 2022 budget, and I do ask you again to approve that. And I thank you for your past I thank you for your support that you have shown us in the past. So I appreciate it. Thank you all very much.
Thank you. Aaron, and after Aaron, we have Brendan Leahy.
Good evening. I'm Erin Porterfield. I serve as the Executive Director for Heartland Workforce Solutions located at 5752 Ames Avenue. Heartland Workforce Solutions is the workforce development board for this 3-county area. Douglas is by far the most dense and the largest, the most populated. You have seen Heartland Workforce Solutions be present for the community and proudly serve, being only one of a handful of American Job Centers that were open throughout the pandemic. I can tell you that the unemployment rate has decreased. That's not something that is new to you, but as we reflect on March of this recent year, we were at 7.6% unemployment and now hovering around the 2.7. We know now that people are still in need of unemployment assistance. Unemployment is one of our partner programs at the American Job Center at 5752 Ames, but there are more than 15 co-located partners available for people. All of these services are available for free for job search, resume help, mock interviews, adult education, training dollars, career coaching, support services. All of these are available for all people throughout this area, but mainly we know that people who experience employment barriers need us the most, and that's why we're located in the North Omaha area, and that's also why we have a footprint beginning at Metro Express for South Omaha. City of Omaha budget contains funding for operating and also for a program called Career Readiness to Eliminate Disparities. We're definitely a proponent for the support to these programs. We know that these pieces of funding, these needed pieces of funding, are leveraging other resources in the community, other federal dollars, state dollars, and local foundation dollars that are present for our public. Some pieces that we know about: residents of the zip codes who experience underemployment and unemployment are found most often in our statistics, our service delivery. Payment for credentials that lead to employment in in-demand industries are provided. We quickly connect talent to businesses that are hurting for talent right now, and we're doing that in a way that connects people to laddering careers, not just minimum wage or dead-end jobs. So you can depend on us to be there for the public in town, and I also appreciate your support in the mayor's budget. Continues to be a service in the community, and also our privilege to serve more than 2,400 people per month throughout the year. Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Brendan. And after Brendan, we have Eric Oberg.
Hello, Brendan Leahy, 702 South 38th Street. This is all quite familiar, but I have to ask why we are still increasing the police budget. It doesn't really match our population, it doesn't really deal with the crime rate, it doesn't address our city's needs, and it does not solve the problems we face, problems which includes roads, infrastructure, climate change, the extreme heat, or the smoke that our city had to deal with this very week. It does not deal with the brain drain. It does not deal with COVID. It does not deal with the loss of restaurants, public spaces, music venues, bands, artists, scientists, and all of the other things that make a city a vibrant and exciting place to live. One has to wonder, is this another unnecessary partisan line? One has to wonder if it is the old bipartisan fixation with law and order politics, which has always been out of step with reality and is especially out of step with the wants and needs of this city's residents, especially those who are forced to live within highly militarized police presence. I wonder if it's bureaucracy's tendency to self-replicate far beyond its intended purpose. At the risk of sounding hyperbolic, I wonder if it's the banality of evil, where local and decent government officials who are just doing their jobs are effectively assisting an institution which in the past several years at least has repeatedly, brutally, violently, and viciously violated the rights of hundreds, if not thousands, of the city's citizens. Try to be brief. Evidence suggests that investing in arts, education, parks, libraries, and even beautiful public fountains would do far more to reduce crime than increasing police funding. My second point, it would be a much more practical and efficient use of our resources to invest more in Omaha's public spaces, civil infrastructure, arts, science, and our climate resiliency, which is going to be an increasing problem for us. We're already dealing with it. It would make this city more attractive for all of the young people who are leaving for greener pastures. In a couple years alone, thousands of them college residents, many of them artists, poets, and other people who would make this a richer city. And connected to the first point, reduce crime. And I have to wonder, how much money does this city lose to police-related lawsuits? I mean, honestly, why don't we just give the money straight to the attorneys and skip a step? If you dislike the term defund, you can think of it as a reallocation or streamlining, because nationally speaking, we've been using the police since at least the 1960s to fill gaps in civil infrastructure we've been cutting, largely for ideological reasons. and it's just not efficient. It causes more problems than it solves. Reallocate some of these proposed funds to services and infrastructure that can benefit the city, rather than what is benefiting essentially a few powerful interests. My experience is that this is kind of a futile gesture, and for the sake of a little fantasy, I'm going to kind of end things with a quote from one of my favorite books, which is The Lord of the Rings. Frodo agreed to act as deputy mayor until the mayor was well again. The only thing he did as mayor was to reduce the sheriffs to their proper functions and numbers. Thank you.
Thank you. Eric Oberg, please. After Eric is Marna Stack.
My name is Eric Oberg. I'm at 6319 North 36th Avenue here in Omaha. Speaking in opposition to the mayor's proposed police budget, I would like to see the city council instead give greater funding to our communities, specifically through housing, human rights, and parks and libraries. Once again, I and fellow library workers, as well as workers in other parts of the city, including our schools, are being told by the mayor to do more with less. Meanwhile, the police department continues to be showered with increased funding anytime they want more, virtually no questions asked. This past year, when part-time city workers who have been denied union membership and any job protection faced unfathomable uncertainty, the city told us there was simply no money and left us high and dry to fend for ourselves. Yet when we joined our brothers and sisters in the streets in solidarity for justice, the city miraculously found copious amounts of money for police overtime and National Guard troops to surveil, beat, harass, and point weapons at us and our children, spending $2 million in just 1 week on police overtime in the process. This past year, when resources and functionality for libraries, parks, and schools were throttled, we still made sure to budget for a new juvenile detention jail. Minimal support for Omaha's disadvantaged youth, but at least we'll have plenty more cages for them when the inevitable consequences of austerity come home to roost. It was estimated that the city saved around $1.3 million, only half of just that single week's worth of police overtime, by taking away my job last year and the jobs of other library workers during last year's furlough, with no regard for the financial precarity forced upon us. It's also estimated that the city saved nearly as much, $1 million, just by reducing police overtime in general, not from reducing jobs, just overtime alone. Not even eliminating, but merely reducing. Similarly, a mere 10% police staffing reduction saved well over 3 times that amount. And that still saved far more than was saved by the 50% reduction in full-time library staffing. This is just one small peek at how obscenely overbloated our police budget is. The library is forced to operate perpetually understaffed, and the department continually told to keep their budgets lean, and even then we're asked to justify having as much staff as we do. Looking at this budget made me question whether the same austerity is being applied to the police department. I don't think we've seen anything from the administrative or finance departments to indicate the police department faces any such similar scrutiny, despite sustained public outcry about their swelling presence, heavy-handed approach, and insistence on being given more and more of the city's budget. Lastly, I'm not just a library professional, I am also a U.S. Army infantry combat veteran. I know what it looks like when a militaristic organization wants all the funding, all the weapons, all the power, and no meaningful accountability for how they treat those over whom they wield that power, and who have none of those things for themselves. It angered me seeing abuse of power and violence against ordinary people overseas, so it naturally angers me seeing it happen in my home city when police respond to protests with militarized force and the threat of state violence. 3 minutes to speak about the city's priorities sends a message that our leaders don't care about what we have to say. And the mayor's budget, as it is, also sends a message that our city government is unwilling to change and unwilling to listen to its less well-to-do citizens. You can send a different message right now, and I sincerely hope the City Council will do so. Thank you.
Thank you. Marna Stack, please. After Marna is Johnny Red.
Hi, I'm Marna. I'm a native Omahan, 609 South 31st Avenue. So, as many others today, I'm here to speak about how I'd like to reallocate funds originally intended to increase the police budget into measures that address root causes. And in talking about this, I want to encourage everyone to take a moment and take a step back out of your shoes, close your eyes, and walk into the shoes of a 10-year-old girl named Brittany. Brittany comes from a single-parent household because her father passed away from cancer and has left the family in considerable debt. Brittany's mother is constantly stressed and works multiple jobs to support the family. Brittany is a good kid and tries to help watch her younger sister and help around the house, but with money tight, they often have to skip meals and skip rent. The car breaks down. Brittany's school performance gradually begins suffering as a result. The stresses The stresses begin to accumulate, and Brittany's mental state is stretched thin. She turns to unhealthy coping mechanisms. She steals to provide for her family. She develops destructive behaviors. She gets arrested and in trouble with the law. Stories like Brittany's, there are many stories like Brittany's. Elements may differ, but the chain is similar. We don't start out as hateful people meriting protection and intervention by law enforcement. These behaviors are largely born from a lack of basic needs being met. That is why I'm encouraging the council to consider addressing these root causes, to spend more funds, these funds that were originally intended for increase in police budget, to addressing the root causes, specifically to affordable housing, to access to healthy, nutritious foods for all, and a more robust mental health care system. Thank you.
Thank you. Johnny, please. After Johnny is Jay Hayden.
Oh my goodness. Good evening, council members. My name is Johnny Red, and I reside at 300 South 16th Street, apartment 705 in Omaha, Nebraska. I'm speaking today to oppose the 2022 City Budget General Fund as well as the Capital Improvement Plan. With funds diverted from the Omaha Police Department, I ask you to invest in programs that support affordable housing, mental health outreach, and transit infrastructure. I ask you to do this because, frankly, the basic needs of many residents are not met, and increased police funding has been proven not to reduce crime, according to a 60-year study by the Washington Post. As a city, we need to be proactive rather than reactive, which is why I implore you, Council, and especially my representative, Councilman Begley, to follow the lead of former Councilman Duran last year and divest even a small drop in the bucket away from the police budget and invest into the community. Even reallocating less than 1% of the $169 million allocated to the police could fund an entire new department to focus on one of these other issues. 3% reallocated could fund an unarmed civilian traffic safety division, which could prevent further tragic deaths like that of Kenneth Jones, who was killed at a traffic stop by the Omaha Police Department. Since 2015, 23% of people killed by the police were experiencing a mental health crisis, including Zachary Bearheels. Funding could be invested in a Cahoots-style mental health response program to prevent further needless deaths like this. The $4 million allocated for a new police helicopter in the Capital Improvement Fund is morally reprehensible when you look at the amount of homeless residents in Omaha and at our crumbling transit infrastructure, which many low-income people, especially from historically redlined Black and brown neighborhoods, rely on. This is especially disgusting given that the police already crashed 2 previous helicopters paid for by taxpayer money. Our money, my money. The responsibility of feeding, clothing, and empowering our homeless neighbors has fallen on the shoulders of a handful of grassroots mutual aid groups, while the city continues to funnel money into a department that intimidates and harasses the homeless for simply existing on a city street. This is unacceptable. Please consider investing in programs that nurture and uplift the community rather than punishing the residents you are supposed to represent. Thank you.
Thank you. Jay. After Jay is Jamie Gassman.
Hello, my name is Jay Hayden. I live at 542 South 26th Avenue, Omaha, Nebraska. I stand here in opposition to the budget as written. I'm an educator and an artist. I work at the Rose Theater, and I spend time working in and around the Omaha public school system teaching theater and encouraging students to express their creativity, ages 3 to 18. You've actually heard from some students who I'm lucky enough to call my own students tonight. When I visit middle schools like King Science or Morton or Nathan Hale, students share with me their very real fear of walking home after school, not because of people in their communities, but because of people policing their communities. Because they're afraid to commit the crime of living while Black. At 11 years old, they're afraid of the people whose chief purpose is to allegedly protect and serve. I urge you to consider this active expression of generational trauma found in kids as young as 11 years old due to the disgusting, reprehensible practices of the Omaha Police Department. The fact is, the police are non-answer to a mental health crisis. And the idea that having a jerk off with a gun helps somebody when they're in a mental health crisis is absolutely ridiculous. And if you can't see that, I don't know what to tell you. These funds should go to the community. The profound lack of accountability for the transgression made by OPD is disgusting. And the notion that we should increase funding reads as if we'd be rewarding this behavior. You are fully and utterly complicit in what happens after today. $5.3 million would help a lot of libraries. It would make a lot of bike lanes, and it would house a lot of people. This budget instead sends that to murderers. I urge you to consider the 11-year-olds afraid to leave school at the end of the day when you consider this budget and when you lay your head down to rest tonight. Value the people, fund the people. And I leave you with a quote from the late, great Woody Guthrie. I know the police cause you trouble because when you die and go to heaven, you'll find no policeman there. Thank you.
Thank you. Jamie, please. After Jamie is Pierce Carpenter.
Good evening, y'all. My name is Dr. Jamie Gassman, 9615 South 171st Ave, Omaha. I'm a military spouse, a worker, a former public policy analyst, and a mother. Let's start with an international analogy. In countries where we have a military presence, the military is asked to do things it isn't trained for simply because it has the majority of the budget. In comparison, dedicated professionals in humanitarian organizations and the State Department have microscopic budgets. But I don't want to send soldiers to negotiate in a political crisis, because if we send a company of soldiers instead of professional diplomats, the outcome is more likely to be violent. The solution is easy. It's a simple budget design. So to bring that home quite literally, let's consider what will happen if I call for help because someone in my family is having a mental health crisis. This is a very real consideration for me. This is personal. When I make that call for help, I do not want anyone with guns to come to my home. Not even accompanying a mental health professional, so no co-responders, because you and I both know I could very well be making a call that causes the death of my family member who needs help, and I cannot bear that. We need mental health crisis response that is completely separate from the police department. We need to invest in other community programs and departments as well. You all have a precious opportunity before you. It's so incredible, it makes my heart hurt. Most of us cannot point to a date and time when we had the opportunity to affect real change in other people's lives at the structural, systemic level. But you do, right now. Please have the humility to recognize that increasing the police budget isn't helping the people of Omaha. Please have the vision and bravery needed to put on the brakes, be good stewards of taxpayer money, and redesign the allocations in this budget. Please use your power to reallocate funds to social programs in ways that support the folks who elected you. One last small point. I ask you to consider the voices of the Black, Brown, and Indigenous folks outside protesting the proposed budget. Consider those voices with much more weight than mine.
Thank you. Pierce Carpenter, please. After Pierce is Amanda Huckins.
Hello. I was wondering why the name always says Kimberly Hosing rather than Pierce
City
Carpenter.
Clerk.
Okay. My name is Pierce Carpenter. I live at 4832 Farnham, and I voted for you, Mr. Danny Begley. So, you know, you owe me now. I'm here to, as a proponent of the Stothert budget, I kind of looked at the police thing because I know that seems to be a big ticket item. And, you know, the population's up 18%, but if you go to the CPI, it's up 61% since 2000. This is since 2005. And if you multiply those two together, 118 by 161, it's 193. And the budget in 2005 was 80, and now it's 161, or it's doubled. But the increase is from cost of living and increased population is only 193. So that's actually very reasonable. It's only changing about 4% over, what, 15, 16 years? I mean, I think you guys are on the mark. Then when you add into that you know, all the social justice stuff going on, everybody's got a cell phone. The police scrutiny is unbelievable. I'm sure the training is probably at least doubled. Officers probably have to have twice the training they had before. There's processors everywhere. There's SCADA processors out in front of the building now. I asked the police downstairs, they didn't even know what they were for. Political corrections, another battle everybody has to fight. You got to say everything just right. When you send a police officer somewhere, I can't imagine you would want anybody to go somewhere without two officers. So the first officer could testify that the second officer didn't do whatever they were being accused of. There's a lot more public discontent out there. Body cameras, that's another expense that I think is well warranted. They say there's no correlation between spending more on police and crime going down. Well, that's because you guys don't like to spend money on police, and the only way you're going to increase the police expenditure significantly if crime goes up. So my guess is the correlation is as crime goes up, people spend more on police. Yeah, I'm not surprised there's not a correlation between crime going down and more with a higher expenditure on police. I have a couple personal incidences. In '94, I got a bike stolen. They sent a police officer over to my house for a bicycle. 2017, I think, I got my car broke into, $600 worth of stuff. They said fill out a report. They didn't even want to see me. So the service has actually gone down. I will say one thing that I was very pleased with, the riots that occurred in these other cities did not occur here due to Stothard's quick action. And so I just, to summarize, I support the police. Don't cut their spending. Have a good day.
Thank you. Amanda Huckins, please. After Amanda's Kylisha Peak.
Hello, my name is Amanda Huckins. I live at 6665 Ohio Street in District 1, and I'm here opposing the proposed 2022 city budget because I strenuously oppose increasing the police budget. I'm an early education teacher. I teach children ages birth through 3, and I'm in the really awkward position of having to edit police out of the community helper lessons because of my own personal experience and because of the experiences of the children in my class and people I know. And so community helper lessons are like about firefighters and nurses and teachers and often police, people who are supposed to make the community a better place. But I've witnessed enough misconduct and dangerous disregard for public safety, particularly in the last year, that I don't, with like a clean conscience, add police to those lessons. Another big part of my job, and one I take very seriously, involves teaching very, very young children how to self-regulate emotionally. Self-regulation is the ability to manage your own emotions and perceptions, and it's a really important part of public safety for individuals to manage our own difficult emotions and to work with others to resolve conflict and heal our communities. I've seen, especially over the last year again, but in other times, the police force seems extremely dysregulated. It seems like when the police are critiqued, they take it out on the public and they're armed, so that makes it really scary when they're dysregulated, and you guys are giving them money for them to act like that towards the citizens of this community. Let's see here. Yeah, and so in addition to my own very limited firsthand experience, many of the kids and families that are in my care and that I work with at my job have had multiple traumatic experiences with police or because of the disproportionate surveillance and contact with police that is experienced by Black and brown residents of Omaha and Nebraska as a whole. And so I'm asking you to reallocate funding to effective, committed, and self-regulated community helpers like librarians, educators, bus drivers, waste removal workers, healthcare providers, and et cetera. I think our taxpayer money would be much better used to make our community safer and put the safety of the community in the hands of people who are already helping keep it safe and not using, chemical weapons on residents when they express political opinions. So, thank you for listening.
Thank you. Kylisha. After Kylisha is Jennifer Penton.
Sorry. Kailisha Peak, 1360 South 75th Street. First of all, I would like to thank everyone who spoke today. It's very hard coming to these year after year, not getting the things that you ask for from your city council people. But I also would like to thank the city council people who responded to my email. So Mr. Rowe, I'm here, I'm safe, thank you. And Councilman Festerson, to your question about the ARPA funds, I say, why not both? Why not both the ARPA funds and the budget be put towards things that the people want? So for the past week, I've been very busy. I've asked the question, what would you like to see the city of Omaha invest more in and divest more in? And over 60 people answered that question. And I have it here in a booklet. And there's 8 of them, one for each of you and one for the mayor. And in the book, you will see repetition. And with repetition, you see patterns. And with patterns, you see movement. And with movement, you see change. So I ask of you today to read this book, read what the people have said that they would like to see for the city of Omaha, and to be the change makers that the people want you to be. So yeah, thank you. Have a good night.
Thank you. And I can attest to that action because we met each other over the weekend while you were collecting opinions, right?
Yep.
Yeah, thanks for coming. Good to see you. Jennifer Penton.
Hi, Jennifer Penton, 415 Leavenworth, 68102. Speaking of address 68102, Danny Begley, you are my district. I want to talk about address specifically because Danny, I was canvassing for Cammie, and during my time canvassing for her, you sent out a mailer about protesting and how people will burn things down when we protest. So you have made it very clear that you want to defund the police. Amy Melton, you have made it very clear that you want to defund the police by tweeting and saying these things on social media. Last year, we all stood up here and spoke to Pete Festerson. You suggested that we reallocate, I think it was $2 million towards housing, rights and human rights and relations. $2 million is not enough. While we really appreciate that and the community sees that, and we thank you for that, it's not enough. We know that everybody that sits on city council, we basically know where you stand at this point, so we know where you're going to vote. But right now, while we all get a chance to come up here and talk to you, we're here to try and tell you our personal experiences with the budget, why we have an issue with it, where we need help. We are given a chance to tell you why we want to reallocate funds to certain places. So while we know where you might stand, because we've seen you tweet about it, we've seen you make remarks about it, we've read your emails, we've called your offices, we still get a chance to change your minds. Just like if the police were to pull me over and I did something wrong, I get a chance to take whatever action is taken against me and change and make a change. So you can make a change. If you've made your mind up and you have sat here and listened to 60 to 80 people speak, you can still change your mind, you can still change your vote, and you can vote against the proposed budget for 2022. I am here to mainly speak. I want to say that another point that I'd love to make is I haven't heard a lot of people talk about, over the last year, we've seen the police budget fail miserably after we didn't do anything last year, specifically at protests. There were people that were targeted. The ACLU was surveillancing certain protesters for no reasons. They knew where they were going for birthday parties, things of those such. Why are we allocating money to the police budget so we know where a certain person is going to be on Saturday night for their birthday party? That's ridiculous. That is absolutely ridiculous. If I'm correct, I believe that the Human Rights and Relations is still a mere, if I'm not exactly correct, around there, 0.03%.
Jennifer, we have the red light if you can summarize.
Yep. That is, I think that's ridiculous. So I'm here to take time, think about it, sleep on it. We need to reallocate these funds. The police have way too much money, way too much money. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Next, we have folks that are here in person but have gone through the process of testifying without having to provide their address. So I want to take them next. Annika Ellefson, are you here? After Annika, we have David Carney.
My name is Annika Ellefson, and I am part of District 3 under Councilmember Begley. I'm here to speak as an opponent to the proposed 2020 City of Omaha budget. Thank you to the City Council first for giving the public the opportunity to speak on something as important as our budget. I only wish we had more of these vital moments to contribute to the budget process. Our money should not be going to the police in the way that it is. Our police department is bloated, both monetarily and with regard to staff. It has too many responsibilities and too few solutions to truly reduce crime and improve safety in our community. According to statistics reported by the FBI, our violent crime rates have been stagnant since 2010. Despite this, our police budget has risen by an average of 5.8% or $5,828,366.50 yearly. My apologies, my notes are bad. The difference between the 2020-10 budget and the 2021 budget is $65,819,279. Clearly, our data matches what cities all across the U.S. have reported. More police does not mean less crime. Instead of going to the police, the $2.8 million intended for another gun range, $4 million for another helicopter, and at least part of the $80 million intended for the new headquarters should go towards initiatives and programs that will provide concrete support and change for our community. Rent assistance programs would help keep families together and ensure more people have homes. Community centers provide a constructive space for kids who might otherwise be getting into trouble. A properly trained mental health emergency response program, imperatively separate from the police, would go a long way toward curtailing dangerous situations before they reach the point of violence. The mental health program really does need to be separate. It's all well and good to budget for a new mental health coordinator, but ultimately they are still police personnel to us. Giving this responsibility to the police is a terrible mistake. The very fact that they are police personnel will destroy a great deal of the trust that our citizens need to have in them for them to be effective. Please consider this for a moment. According to a research article published by the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences in 2019, about 1 in every 1,000 Black men will be killed by the police. How are our most vulnerable citizens supposed to trust the organization that has a significant statistical likelihood of killing them? How are Indigenous people and neurodivergent people supposed to trust those who killed Zachary Bearheels? On top of issues with trust, aren't we overburdening the police? Delegating responsibility is necessary. An unarmed traffic force, a trained and separate mental health emergency team like STAR or Kahoot, real rent assistance programs, community centers, etc., will reduce the crushing pressure on both the police and our population better than a new gun range or a helicopter ever could. Please consider reallocating $5 million for a mental health response team and $2 million for rent assistance. Thank you.
Next, we have David. Is David Carney here? I don't see him. We'll go to Emily Suffy. And after Emily is Gabrielle Rima.
Hello, my name is Emily Sufi. I live in District 1. I am an opponent of the Omaha City budget. I'm speaking in opposition because of what I see in Omaha today. I see a lack of public transportation, cell phone towers being built in the middle of sidewalks, trash that the city is not picking up, sidewalks never meeting the needs of people with disabilities, and potholes we can never seem to get right. I am proposing to divest from the Omaha Police Department and invest into programs like an unarmed Civilian Traffic Safety Division, affordable housing, mental health response teams, and expanding public transportation. I want to focus in on implementing an unarmed civilian traffic safety division. We can create dedicated traffic agencies whose sole purpose is road safety. We could staff unarmed employees and enforce routine traffic laws with less violence and damage. We can do this by divesting $5 million from the police department and investing into a separate program. Currently, Berkeley, California is currently working on a program called BerkDOT, and it's been really interesting to read up on that. Another amendment I propose is creating a separate program from Omaha Police Department that deals with the 15,000 to 20,000 calls that we receive a year just for mental health. We can create this by divesting $3 million from the Omaha Police Department and investing into a program like STAR Emergency Response Program. Eugene, Oregon has their CAHOOTS program that we have been hearing about. Denver is following closely behind. In 2019, CAHOOTS has been able to handle over 18,000 calls in response to wellness and mental health checks. We would like to see our public transportation grow, encourage more people to take the bus, create more protected bike lanes. We know that owning a vehicle and having to keep up with payments and repairs is a heavy burden on most people. Bigger public transportation that spreads to North and South Omaha creates more jobs while also securing jobs across town for others. Last year, Jerem created an amendment that allocated $2 million into mental health services. We would like to see that and more today from our city council. What will you guys be remembered for? Thank you.
Thank you. Gabrielle.
Good evening. My name is Gabrielle Rima. I live in District 1. I'm here today as an opponent to the proposed city budget for 2022. So the proposed budget would grant the Omaha Police Department the largest portion of the general fund. And if you exclude the fire department, it gives them more of the general fund than any other city department combined. This is nothing new, of course. The same was true of last year, of this current year's budget, and likely the one before that. I remember standing in this very room just last year as over 70 people testified and dozens more protested outside to tell you pretty much the same things we're here to tell you tonight, that we want the general fund to be invested into our communities, to be invested into things that actually prevent crime and allow us to live safer, more fulfilling lives. Things like affordable housing, a topic that many of you ran your election and re-election campaigns on, food security, positive youth development, arts and culture, public transit, and workforce development. There's this idea that Omaha has a civic engagement problem, that the people of Omaha are content with the status quo, that we don't know, we don't care. However, as someone who has been dedicated to civic engagement and education work for the past few years, I can tell you definitively that that's not true. There's no lack of passion, concern, and care for our community in Omaha. The problem we have is a listening problem, and that problem comes from the people in power more often than not. And I say this because I watched all of those people last year at the budget meeting and throughout the year protest and testify and call and email, and nothing changed. The budget process begins in January, and the public is not even thought of until July. And we're only given 2 weeks to read, understand, and form an opinion on a 400-plus page document before our one and only chance to speak on it, though we are the ones funding it, tonight. If this is our only chance to be heard, hear us. I urge you to be open to our statements and open to your community tonight. And with that, I'll leave you with our final call to action. Last year, former Council President Chris Jerem did hear us and suggested an amendment that would fund community programs. That amendment did not pass. I'm asking you for an amendment to the budget that would divest the $5.3 million increase to OPD and instead invest it in mental health resources, positive youth development, and taking care of the people of Omaha before the police become involved. Thank you.
Thank you. That's everyone we have registered in person. We do have one person registered by Zoom. Thank you for your patience and for staying with us. I believe she resides in District 1. Alexandria, we'll try to get you online here. I think you're off mute now.
Hey. Okay. My name is Alex O'Hanlon. I live at 3010 Lincoln Boulevard. Today, I'm here via Zoom as an opponent of the current budget. I have some suggestions for how we could spend money differently to be proactive in our attempt to maintain a safe community for all of Omaha's residents, and to be more fiscally responsible in the long term. Firstly, I believe the $5 million increase in spending on the police budget must be spent differently. Specifically, I would like to see the money reallocated to programs that help to keep residents safe, such as rental assistance, home repair programs, and an emergency response team separate from OPD, such as Cahoots. I would also like to see money from the increase in the police budget reallocated to hold listening sessions to create a better budget for 2022. The city should allocate money to hold quarterly listening sessions starting in the fall of 2021 with Omaha residents. In these listening sessions, residents will weigh in on how they would like to see city resources allocated to meet the needs of their neighborhoods. This information will be used to design the budget. This will make hearings such as this one and the jobs of our elected representatives more effective. Additionally, I take issue with the CIP as proposed. There is $172 million allocated to be spent on road widening, while only $29 million on traffic calming, road diets, and pedestrian investments, and $0 on protected bike lanes. Here's another place to look to reallocate funding to be proactive to make our city safer. This year in the CIP, there is more than $85 million increase for spending on car storage. This is parking garages. I suggest we take $20 million of that to calm traffic and install more protected bike lanes. We could have safer streets and fewer traffic fatalities. This would allow us to decrease our police funding over the long term, since there would be less automobile traffic to police. Lastly, another step we can take with this budget to be proactive in keeping the community safe is to reallocate funding in the CIP for a study on the impact more extreme weather will have in Omaha. We need to allocate money to create a climate mitigation plan, which will outline the steps that the city plans to take to reduce its impact on climate change. We must also allocate money to create a climate impact response plan, which will detail how the city plans to respond to increasingly severe storms, more frequent flooding, extreme temperatures, prolonged droughts, and how to prepare for the potential impact that migration due to extreme weather could have on the city. One thing we can do this year with this budget that comes to mind is allocating money from the new police helicopter in the CIP for preventative tree trimming. This will help folks living in older residents with large trees to have their properties be more resilient when storms come and save response time for local utilities after the storm. If the city allocated money for this, it could work with community partners to train and place folks in these jobs, which would create jobs, which is something that's often talked about as an alternative use for funding instead of it going to policing. This is just one idea. There's lots of innovative ways to approach the budget of a growing city. I want to say that Omaha needs more dynamic thinking, but we don't need that. We already have so many brilliant, talented, and dedicated people in this town, many of whom spoke today. We don't need more dynamic thinking. We just need to engage and implement the forward-thinking ideas to create a safer community that are already here. Amending the 2022 city budget as it is currently proposed is a great place to start. Thank you.
Thank you. That concludes our testimony for tonight. As we indicated at the start of the meeting, at this point in the process, council members may consider amendments to the budget. Those amendments and the budget itself would be considered at this point on August 17th. Do I have a motion to adjourn? Motion to adjourn. Roll call.
Harding. Johnson. Yes. Melton. Yes. Palermo. Yes. Rowe. Yes. Bagley. Aye. Mr. President.
Yes.
Motion passed 7-0. Meeting is adjourned at 8:48.